later on in the day when Mitch was at the Capitol. And I remember he was supposed to join us for a hit, and he wasn't there. So I knew something was up.
We should just move forward, and the police should move out of the way.
I get a call to the newsroom, and I answer. He's like, "So we're being evacuated under the tunnels." Hi, Ellen.
Smell the tear gas.
And that's when I was like, holy crap, this is crazy. And I remember him saying, yeah, we are being told to put on gas masks. You instantly kind of got goosebumps, and I was like, my focus then shifted from, we got to get this live coverage to, oh my God, is Mitch going to be okay? Is he going to make it out of there? You know, what's going on? So I remember that kind of being a turning point.
There were drips and drabs of information and chatter that were leaking out on social media that I was actually seeing as a lot of rallies after the election were taking place. And you were starting to see keywords or key phrases kind of drop, like stop the steal. And, you know, there were things like, we need to talk about the big lie about who won the election.
So going into that situation, I expected, honestly, that it was not going to be an easy day. I had already been following several of these groups which came in from across the country to D.C. to be there for that rally at the White House Ellipse. And already, you know, in the weeks and months ahead of that, there were some rumblings that there might be some trouble in that area.
And I can remember I think it was a top election official in Georgia coming out and saying, hey, we need to tone this rhetoric down, because if we don't, something's going to happen. I think he says,
someone's going to get hurt, someone's going to get shot, someone's going to get killed.
And sure enough, on January 6th, that's exactly what happened. It just kept escalating in the days leading up to that.
I think that there was enough of a notion that it wasn't going to be an entirely peaceful day. And you know what, regardless of what the trigger might have been or what any groups were intending to do, I think there was just that, you know, that among people who follow, you know, far-right activism, who follow that sort of organizing, there was just the general sentiment that it was going to be a difficult day.
It's 6:03 on Wednesday, January 6th, 2021, 38 degrees, going up to the mid-40s today.
So I came in around the Capitol, saw the demonstrators, knew it was going to be one of those longer days, and came in and basically was mainly focused on what was going to transpire in terms of the presidential election, which is the certification of the Electoral College votes, which is frankly really a symbolic type of thing, but a very important thing, and it really does. We had been pointing to this day for a long time.
That morning, usually I get up very early and start checking sources around the world to see what's happening. And there was a very interesting trend happening in all of the people that I spoke to overseas. They were all talking about Washington.
We begin with team coverage this morning. WTOP's Nick Iannelli is on the National Mall.
Just by looking at Ohio Drive along the Potomac River in southwest D.C., you can tell the crowd is building as parking spaces are quickly being filled in these early morning hours. Thousands are expected to gather for a rally that coincides with the formal electoral vote count in Congress.
These are his supporters who were already, you know, almost right up against each other on the National Mall. That's how many people there were. It was a lot, and it surprised even me.
I was kind of locked in on a couple of sources that were saying things to me about what they were seeing in Washington, because crowds were gathering. I think the day or two before, the leader of the Proud Boys had been arrested because he had a gun magazine in his pocket.
I actually spoke to a Capitol police officer that morning, and we both kind of compared notes with each other. What are you hearing? And do you think it's going to come down here? And how much is going to happen? And one of the officers told me they had some incidents with some Proud Boys. So there was already a little bit of a rumbling, and there was, some tension around here, but clearly it was not anticipated that anything like people actually invading the Capitol would happen.
I can't remember the exact time, but it was probably about 11ish.
So, let's have trial by combat.
Because you'll never take back our country with weakness. You have to show strength, and you have to be strong.
And the rhetoric seemed to get pretty inflamed, and I started thinking, that's a lot of people.
Good afternoon. I'm Mark Lewis.
And I'm Deborah Feinstein. Here are the top local stories we're following this hour. Supporters of President Trump converging on downtown D.C. today as Congress begins to make President-elect Biden's victory official.
At one point, the president himself, during his speech, he said something along the lines of, you should go to the Capitol building. I might even join you there.
And after this, we're going to walk down, and I'll be there with you. We're going to walk down. We're going to walk down anyone you want, but I think right here we're going to walk down to the Capitol.
So I had a pretty unbroken view of both the White House in front of me and the Capitol building to the east of me. And he said that, and as he said that, I looked to my right. I look east down the National Mall with Capitol building in the backdrop, and there were waves of people, with Trump banners, don't tread on me flags, heading, in droves basically towards the building.
The day that it happened, the Stop the Steal rally was, of course, down by the White House, and then slowly people started making their way over here to the west side of the Capitol, which we're looking, of course, down on the Mall, and it was gradual, but eventually there was just this mass of a sea of humanity right around here in this area below the west side.
More repeated bangs coming from the front line here, growing more frequent as time goes on. It appears there is an ongoing clash at the front of this group of Trump supporters who are going face to face with a line of riot police, that's armored Capitol Police, who are blocking further access.
You can only see down so far, and below this alcove, although they eventually climbed up on it, that was where some of the most harrowing initial back and forth and fighting, frankly, between Capitol police officers and these demonstrators. That struggle where they were going across bike racks and they were getting closer and closer and closer until they eventually, as many people have seen, started climbing up on this side and then breaking into the Capitol.
It started unfolding at the end of the midday shift. And then as we took over at 2, it was already, the protesters had been sent. They were marching through Washington. They were outside the Capitol. They had flags. They were angry. They were demanding changes.
Breaking news on WTOP. The U.S. Capitol is now locked down with the lawmakers inside as Donald Trump supporters are clashing with police outside.
People were trying to find out, are we under a lockdown, for example? And then it was made clear that, yes, the Capitol is definitely locked down at that moment. So there's a little bit of, you're doing mainly reporting on what's happening, but at the same time trying to get intel on what's happening around you, not only for what's being reported, but also your personal safety, because you have to think of that as well.
This is really an extraordinary situation. I've been at the Capitol many, many times, and I have not seen a breach that occurred like the one that just did a few minutes ago. On the east side of the Capitol, which is the side that faces the U.S. Supreme Court, demonstrators went through a barricade area and climbed up on the steps of the Capitol. That obviously caused a lot of tension. They've been moving around. First, they were on the Senate side. They are now moving closer to where I am, which is on the House side. There have been more police.
People were shouting, like, let's get them, let's get in there. Trump 2024. Even, things like that. And as I was working my way towards the line of police, the line of armored police by that point, which were attempting to block access to the rest of the building, behind me come dozens of people pulling above them, holding above them a massive Trump banner. And they were just carrying it with them, above their heads, the whole lot of them. And they passed it along each other through that crowd at the front of, beneath the Capitol building. And at one point actually attempted to use it to ram the line of police which had established itself there.
So I was here in this media area. This is a booth where I work, and I was trying to find out furiously about what was happening exactly, both inside the chambers of the Capitol as well as on the west side of the Capitol, which is behind us. And that was where you could hear this dull roar of people. We had no idea that at that point it was like hand-to-hand combat with Capitol police officers. But eventually we were evacuated out of this area. And to give you an idea of how close the insurrectionists were, they were really only about 100 feet away from where we were working inside. So this is a door that was locked from the outside because they didn't want them to get in. And we had no idea that down this hallway, many of these people were right outside of our doors and right outside the House gallery doors. They had just gone into the Capitol wherever they could find a way to get in.
This is a very serious situation, and people need to understand that this is not something that's going to be resolved very easily, because there are thousands and thousands and thousands of people outside of the Capitol that have to be dealt with.
For the next several hours, that crowd just stayed there. There was little movement, remarkably. We now know of all these insane images that emerged from, the inside of the Capitol building, of windows being smashed, of officers being pursued, of people inside, on the Senate floor. But outside the building, things were essentially at a standstill. There was no attempt by police to clear the crowd off Capitol grounds until that night.
Kind of just in shock, I think, and almost a little wired. Instead of, usually after a day like that, I think I'm tired, but I think I was almost like wired from everything going on.
Hey, we're hearing and we're seeing all kinds of social media and reports about the possibility that this may not be over, that this may take place, or something might take place here, something might take place there. So there was, deep into the night on January 6th, well past midnight, probably 1 or 1:30 in the morning, I was still monitoring sources.
We were there for a few hours, and then, to the surprise of some people, including myself, frankly, it became clear that the congressional leadership said, no, we are going back in and we are going to do our job. And they made it very clear that they were going to do that.
We must and we will show to the country, and indeed to the world, that we will not be diverted from our duty.
The United States Senate will not be intimidated. We will not be kept out of this chamber by thugs, mobs, or threats.
I'm Dean Lane. We thank you for taking us along for your Thursday morning ride. Topping the news as we head into this day together, breaking this overnight early morning just a little while ago, Congress formally accepting the electoral vote for president, affirming President-elect Joe Biden as the winner of the election.
I think that the shock kind of came in two different waves. The first was me being there and witnessing what I saw. The presence of riot police around the Capitol building, the presence of people going at police and breaching the building and seeing broken windows. The second wave of of shock came later when I got home. I had time to settle down and kind of get my bearings straight and debrief. And, you know, I went online. For the first time, I actually sat down and began to read coverage from other outlets, from other perspectives of people who had been inside the building, you know, of members of Congress or other journalists who work inside the Capitol building itself. And I saw the videos, you know, of the insurrectionists climbing the steps, you know, police backing off in fear of attack. And that was incredibly shocking to me. That was another way of like, oh my God, this is how far they got.
But then there are things like a Capitol police officer comes up and says, hey, we've got to take a bomb-sniffing dog and go through this area that you haven't been in because we just need to make sure that this is safe. So that is something that definitely will stick with you as you're working. You're thinking, wow, you know, this is an area where they thought it was unsafe. But it wasn't until I took the proverbial deep breath at the end of the day and actually left the building and then turned back and looked at the Capitol that I thought, I can't believe this has happened. And I know that everybody thinks the same way, but when you've been right in the middle of everything, to think that all of that transpired in just a matter of hours was really mind-blowing.
9/11, I was on the roof of the VOA building watching the Pentagon burn. You know, I've been a lot of places, seen a lot of things, but on this particular day, the kind of panic that I think the nation and indeed the world was feeling was palpable. This was something we had never witnessed before, and in part because we never thought we'd ever witness it. I mean, you go to a war zone, you expect suicide bombings. You know, what happened on 9/11, we were warned about that. We were told it was coming, but nobody said anything like this would ever happen, that Americans would do something like this.
There have been days where I was walking around the Capitol just thinking about what happened by myself on a day when Congress wasn't in session. And it's just me, a few Capitol police officers, and some people with the architect of the Capitol within the building. And to think about what actually transpired here is just incredible, and you can't ever really let it go.